Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the King CJ Music Podcast, where we talk hip hop culture, we talk music in general, but we also talk about the impact on some of the legal standards of the impact of hip hop as it currently stands today. I don't know, this seems like a weird introduction. Where do I start? Where do I begin? I guess the conversation begins. This is a King CJ Music Podcast where we talk about this, but it's been a while. Right, I didn't want to drop last week because I thought if I had dropped last week, I would have. Um, it would seem weird to talk about these albums and the way that I'm going to talk about these albums because essentially the main conversation is social impact, and so we've seen three social impacts from three different artists from three different styles, and in two different contexts, right? So essentially, we're looking at the intersection of a geographical location compared to the impact um, that these songs are gonna make. And so, like, it's been an interesting time for music. And so, um, I like these albums as they currently stand. I think this is the issue, though. Um, I enjoy these albums a little bit too much, right? Because essentially, what you hear from an NF album is essentially the impact that the American industry or the American hip hop industry has and does to an artist. On that same frame up, you see where he mentions on the song "Washer," where he says that he needs um, kind of the criticism that comes along with hip hop to understand his kind of like improve or express himself more in hip hop. But then you have an album like Dave's album where you see the very complex um where you see the very complex side of an album like the boy that played the harp. You hear that complex album, right? You hear those two albums and you're like, that's very complex, right? But then you hear a more simplistic album, simple as I believe the album called, and I want to make sure I say this album right because I love Cat Burns' music. It's one of these albums in which if you listen to it, it's how to be a human. It's very much talking from a perspective that many people don't talk about from a, like they genuinely do not talk about these perspectives. Um, and so when you see these impacts, especially in songs like "Small Talk" or "Please Don't Hate Me," where we're focused on that relationship or that experience of moving on from a relationship, you hear these albums and you go, I don't understand. Or the simplicity of, hey, I'm a human going through human emotions is an album that a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people struggle with because it requires some like inner look. It requires to look inside of yourself to understand these conversations. Like Small Talk, where you're kind of just talking to this person that there's the very subtleties of like if you hmm, if you like listen to the if you like are listening to yourself, you feel the impact of the weight of different songs, how they make you feel throughout this album. Where essentially, how to talk about Cat Burns is one of these albums in which if you if you don't understand the simplicity of like internally looking inside yourself, you will not get this album. Like you have a record that's just for fun, and that's girls, and it's very much a great album. Don't get me wrong. Hearing just for example, just girls like the appreciation for women. It's one of those things that I love that Cat Burns does so well. It's this the very small simplicity of these albums. These albums aren't anywhere where you're like, oh my god, I haven't. It's not where you haven't heard this album and these complexities, but like the like. where you see these songs and you're just like, I truly don't understand how these songs did not make it, right? Where you hear songs like Come Home and you see the simplicity of her kind of grieving in a way, a family member. It's that song in which if you're grieving a family member, you understand the deep complexity of how it takes a toll on you physically because you don't know, you kind of battle with two different you kind of battle with two different versions of yourself, right? You wanna you wanna you wanna you wanna like be able to express yourself. You wanna, it makes you look internally, right? It really does. It does make you want to look internally. Sometimes you want to pay homage to the person or a family that you've lost, and it's one of those deep songs, and it's a very short runtime. Don't get me wrong, it is like 3 minutes and one, and that's how you start the album. It's one of the, this album in itself is one of those albums where I don't like care what emotions you're going through, because if you're going through um, if you're trying to look through a conscious decision, I think one of the best albums on how to be a human is "I Wish You Well." Right? It's that, hey, I'm going to grieve, but I'm also gonna put a positive spin on your negative thoughts or your negative persuasions of yourself. And it's one of the I just this album, "How to Be a Human" by Cat Burns, is just one of those albums in which if you don't don't take a couple of listens, you'll miss a lot of stuff. It's literally just one of the better albums this year. It by far it is. It's an album I've been waiting for. So when we got it in October, I really wanted time to like just experience the Cat Burns album, the rollout, the album, the promotion, the everything that comes along with it. It's one of those things in which it's very special. Let me put it like this: Cat Burns is an artist that I think is very well rounded. This album is one of my favorite albums this year. And that's from like, I'm hoping the Stormy drops, but if he doesn't, go with it. Like, I'm very happy, and if he drops, the next album I want to talk about, and it's an album in which if you ask me the various complexity of these albums, I'm gonna tell you that by far this is one of my favorite albums. I think so far I've heard this album on repeat since it's come out, and this came out like late October. This came like a couple days before How to Be a Human, and these albums in themselves are just chef's kiss. It's one of those albums where if you don't know what you're listening to, it's an album in which you it's this introspection, and I can't physically explain this because it's one of these albums in which if you're not if you're not if you're not looking for the introspection of like why certain women fear men in certain ways, and you'll get in songs like Chapter 16, or if you want that X more focus and you want to listen to Chapter 16 where he wants to forgive, it, it's so weird. This album, and it picks up like um like if you want to listen to Marvelous and you get the Criminal Impact. If you just want to hear an Open Tim's sample or like that, you can hear that. If you want to hear Kane, this. Let me just say, the introspection on this album, and by far, if you want to know, it's one of these albums, and if you've never experienced one of these albums, I don't know what to tell you. I think, you know, there he takes this narrative perspective on like very social issues, right? And that's what I love about David, Santana Dave, or like Dave as an artist, because he takes very social issues that people are dealing with in this current climate or like currently dealing with, and turns that introspection into intersection. And when he turns that into intersection of, okay, I'm this, but if I look at it from a different lens, in different contexts of different environments, then I understand it. And so we hear it in chapter 16 where he focuses on that, but then he focuses on history. Like the song "History" is one of the most it's one of the most original sounds on this album, where you hear like the bass of the music open up. You hear the introduction breathe, and with he fills it with enough space and noise that people love the album. Like it's not an album in which if you have no idea who this artist is, it's not a bad introduction. It's it's just, hey, you're narrating how people are dealing with life in this current situation. And so that's what I'm saying. When it comes to social issues between Cat Burns and Dave, the UK has this introspection that I love. Uh, And so I've gravitated towards more of that. Graduated. Ooh, I've shifted my focus to looking at that because Little Sims Lotus that came out this year is that same feeling, right? Like it's that, hey, I'm dealing with some personal stuff right now. Let me make it into the music. Let me add a few people I'm related to. Let's fill this album. And Cat Burns did the same thing. So did they focused on like the introspection of their own self, and then try to express that to their fans, which I enjoy by like every mean that is set out here. Those two albums by themselves are 9 out of 10 for me, and so we see that like the similarities between artists that have like a different mindset or a different perspective. Now let's talk about I don't know how to put this because originally my idea was, hey, if you talk about these 9 out of 10 albums that are positive in the aspect of themselves that people are dealing with currently in that climate that they are, it's going to be hard to talk about an NF album in which he's critiquing himself, but also critiquing the current state of hip hop, which I enjoy. I do enjoy. Let me like I do enjoy it because if you don't do it that way, then you fully don't understand the hard similarities that are between people dealing with, like we hear Washta where he's talking about essentially the fear that comes with him making music because he at one point he felt like he was washed up because he felt like his time has passed. Now, NFNs will tell you, um, they will tell you that they don't think it is because there's been a shift in the current state of American hip hop, and so him saying that he thinks his time has come, it signals to a lot of people that hip hop has shifted, but not necessarily in a way that they're like, hey, this is a positive impact on how people view hip hop. But like at the same time he argues he battles this internal clock or this internal criticism of that he should quit music, and I think a lot of artists are feeling that way, like if they should quit music. And so when you hear an artist like enough kind of touch on topics like that where they're like, maybe I should, and you're like, I don't know, right? Because the conversation, this brings me to this conversation of he thinks he should quit, and the argument can be made when you have artists like Ren, or you have artists like Token, or you have artists like NF, where they're more conscious leaning themes, right? Or they're showing the similarities of their musical talent and um, more like a conscious considered rap. You see these artists shine but people don't necessarily like conscious rap enough to support it. So then the artists are battling with these ideas of maybe I missed, maybe I have like not necessarily done what I should have done to make better ways for artists. And essentially, I mean, I think in a by any means, I think the search may be his hardest album to beat, and I think we have the same similarities between him and Bryson Tiller. But I think when you listen to this album, it's a very good album put together, or EP, whatever we're calling it. It doesn't have that 12 back since back. I think it's very short. It's very short, but like it's not something in which I wouldn't be afraid about. Like it's weird. His album's named Fear, so you see the like the context of him going, "Hey, I fear this," and so when you get to these songs, you're like, I don't know if I fear that, right? Like I think you can get to an artist and wonder like where you hear him himself on "Give Me a Reason," where he just wants to like push himself harder and push himself more forward. But I think his consistency of dropping music isn't a bad thing, right? Because it gives you something to develop. It gives you more life to develop and release better music for your fans. So it's just like he thinks he's missed his prime, and I think essentially a lot of artists battle this idea of, hey, I missed my opportunity. I don't think he will though. I think the numbers may be relatively like maybe different from an artist that has like a huge fan base and their fan base constantly puts out for them. It may be different in that aspect, but I don't think it'll like shift the culture too much because I think he is a great artist. I think he touches on issues in which I enjoy, but I also think that introspection for me from an artist is something I really do enjoy. And people will say, "Oh, well, that's storytelling," and partially that is storytelling, but it is that inner work that needs to be done. And so when you get these albums that essentially put on these shows for people that kind of are more from an artist's perspective, where they're narrating their life or they're narrating topics that are more difficult to swallow, I think you get artists like NF, you get artists like Cat Burns, you get artists like Ren, you get artists like Token, you get artists like Eminem, you get artists that are more focused in the messaging that they display in their music compared to, oh well, we don't really care. But overall, I think all of these albums are nine because they're not they're simple albums and the way that these beats are constructed. They're heavily layered with messaging, and I don't mind that because they know how to deliver these messages. But at that same time, I like these could perfectly be 10s out of 10s across the board. Because I know they're still in my rotation, so it's not necessarily that I hate these albums. I just am more I have more questions than answers. Like it's not a bad thing. I do wonder. Um, I don't know. Like I do wonder if because it makes me wonder if conscious rap is back in the circle, right? In the American scheme of things. But if you look at the UK scheme of things, they've always had it. We had Lotus this year that was very like social and impact, but like very introspective. We had Cat Burns being introspective, but also talking about things that are happening in her life. So Lotus and How to Be Human are connected, and Dave with these social issues is something that I enjoy. I think if you're looking for a social issue artist, Dave's a Dave's the person to go. Um, like when you first hear him Question Time, where he talks about um the political times that we're in, and it always translates. It always his music always translates into it ends to having a message, and that's that same way where they talk about life, but they also talk about the impact. But you see like the different similarities. Like you see how Dave talks about the UK and how NF talks about the states and how these things are connected but not directly connected in the same ways because these social oh I love the social impact of these two things can be similar but not the same. Like they can have similarities, they can be similar but not all the same way. For example, you know what that sounds like a sociology point that somebody could cover, and I think that'd be great to cover. Um, but currently, you know, I'm gonna wait. I think because I have something ready and booted, but I'm not entirely sure that this is like this episode specifically is the right time to talk about it. When it releases, I'm happy. Um, but I wonder. I do wonder because if you look at these perspectives, you see artists like I just hope these artists get more recognition for what they've done and what they put out because they put out so much amazing work that not giving them the credit or what's due, it just seems weird to me because it's just I don't know this hatred. I'm not sure what it is, but it essentially like that introspection is something in which if you look at the psychology of criminals that you get that Dave gets are marvelous. This it's just one of a kind. I do like that it's a one of a kind perspective. It's something in which if you get it, you get it. If you do not, they try to explain it, and it's just so fun to listen to, especially with the current state of hip hop in the states. It's a fresh air. It's fresh air. So with that being said, I do hope it is like, and it may seem like I'm just filling up the amount of time, but it genuinely like I genuinely like love an artist take that pen and try to make these songs kind of connect and give us a story, give us some introspection, give us like diverse points and try to explain stuff for everyone in the world. But it's so like little of an artist to do it. Like Dave doing it brings it to light, but if an artist like Stormzy or Drake or Kendrick um or Jay Z to bring that really out of somebody, it's one of the better things. With that being said, though, I do hope you enjoy this episode. I know it seems I've been rambling, and I am your host, CJ. With that all being said, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope that you check out another episode. Until then, um, we will see you then.